I am unashamed. What about you?
So, we were trying to see if I had a black eye. Is it this eye?
Yeah.
But this happened days ago.
I don't know, Jace. You look so rough. It's hard for me to tell when you've got an ailment or something else.
I take that as a compliment.
I mean, you look beat up all the time. No offense.
So my daughter's at camp, and my other daughter from Nicaragua, she's at college, and my boys have moved on. So I looked around.
So Karina's not gonna be here this summer. She's normally home.
No, she does, but she's got a job.
Oh, really? Up there?
Oh, I'll tell you. Look, this I got teary-eyed over this. This was not the story I was fixing to tell you. I'll get back to that in a second. But I got teary-eyed.
Story alert! Jace has a new story. Just for our audience to know.
She sent Missy a text, and it was a picture because she has a job during the summer. This girl works, and it's one of the things I love about her. And if none of
she
y'all
works joyfully. She has. I've never seen. Does she ever have a bad moment? Because I've never seen her when she wasn't just like genteel and amazing.
Where's that Hebrews 13 where it says, "Be careful when you entertain strangers"?
Could be an angel.
I thought that for a while.
Yeah.
And the only other person that I've ever thought that about, to my knowledge, was my wife while we were dating. I thought, this girl, I kept looking for, the skeletons in the closet.
You thought you were going to be like the Nephilim. You were going to marry one of the,
Yeah, never know. Talking about some athletes.
Dad thought the same thing about Stevenson. Remember you said, are you an angel? Of course, Dad gave him a choice. Are you an angel or something else?
So if I haven't told you the story about Karina, she was stranded. She had worked her way. She's an orphan girl raised by her grandma. Grandma passed on, and then a guy from a church down there in the I think that was in the Dominican. I get
that's where we first met.
Screwed up so much, but anyway,
Esteban. We met him. A
guy who loves the Lord kind of mentored her. But look, she just had every reason in the world to quit and just be a statistic in a third world country.
Happens every day.
She just said, no, not going to do it. So she's worked and basically through the internet educated herself, got scholarships to high school in Germany and then a college in the U.S. She got stranded during the Civil War in Nicaragua. I got a call in the middle of the night saying, can you get her in the country? And if so, because she had a visa, but it was a time I was like, get her in, we'll take care of her. And I didn't have a good attitude about it because they told me she was 24 and she was 17.
Yeah.
Meet this girl, and I'm like, she's a rock star. She loves Jesus. She has a great attitude. She would get up before daylight and clean the house. And I was like, hey, you don't have to do that here. I mean, I appreciate it. Guess what? She's never stopped.
Yeah.
She's grateful. She won't take a handout in any way. And she's just awesome. But she sent Missy a picture of her desk because she got a job. And she just went on. And Missy come out there and she was telling me, she's like, Karina, she's like, send me a picture of her desk. Yep, that's what we do, Karina. We work. But I told Missy, I said, but you know what it is? I said, she's moved by that because here's a girl, an orphan girl from Nicaragua, who has a place in America that this company set up for an actual, to us, it's just a desk and a chair.
Yeah.
But to her, she's like,
she's proud of that.
This is a place that I've worked and they set this up for me and said, here is your place. And I thought, well, there's a spiritual connection there about belonging. And, then Missy, I saw that lip start quivering, and I was like, yeah, this is good. She's doing good. And so I had to forgive her for she booby traps our house without knowing it because I'm a night owl. This is the story I was going to tell you.
That's where you were getting.
Yeah, so we had Zach. I think they were filming something for you, and Zach's my cousin, and he had this crew. There was like 5 or 6 of them. Well, they stayed at our house.
And there were 3 more at my house, by the way.
Because everybody was gone. And so for some reason, I wasn't there, and I came in. It's late at night. And, you as human beings, we get in habits. And so I don't go to bed till 1 o'clock in the morning. That's just the way it is.
That's why I texted you at midnight last
And
night.
I don't sleep late, which is weird. I get up early. I go to bed late and get up early. It's just the way it is. So I'm going, I thought I was just walking to the bedroom, but the door's always open because there's nobody there. And so I'd forgotten that there were other people there. I walked through our door that was closed. And when I mean through it, I went through it. That's why I had a black eye for a few days. I have this little scar.
You crashed the gate.
I went through the door, hit the floor. I mean, just, I'm scrambling around on my hands and knees. I
would have
phone.
looked and just felt I wouldn't have known whether the door was shut or open.
Why would a man
Because it was dark. I didn't have a light. I turned the lights off as I went in. And so I scramble around trying to find my phone, which is what I should have had. But it's always open. I close it if I want it closed once I go in. And so I look in the mirror and I'm like, seeing if I'm bleeding. And well, here's the fascinating part. Missy's in the bed. I ripped the door, the little door jamb that makes the door close. That's in pieces. I went through the door. I was like, how was I walking that
I was supposed to
fast?
say, you must have been rolling.
You would think. So I ripped that off. That's laying there.
Did it wake her up?
Never woke her up. And so, but I didn't even say anything. You know what's funny about, I guess when you get married 30 years, I have a black eye. She never said, oh, you have a black eye. How'd you get that? And I never told her.
Or why is the door destroyed to our
Never
bedroom?
came up until, so 2 nights later, she cleans out a closet. And of course, now I'm checking that door, which it won't close anyway.
Well, now you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. So she had bagged up a bunch of stuff that she was going to give to Goodwill. Well, guess where she puts it? Right to the left of the door. Well, I trip and fall over that 2 nights later, just in a heap. Right knee. Thought I tore my ACL. So I thought, you know what? I've had enough. So the next morning I said, hey, what is all this stuff? And you know why the door? So I tell her all this and she's like, and I never woke up. And I'm like, why is this about you? So it didn't go well because I'm like, your conclusion from me having 2 altercations in this doorway that were violent is how come I didn't wake up?
Not, are you okay? Did you
Sorry, Jace. I closed the door. She said, well, there were 7.
Thieves would have a much easier time in your house than in mine. I can tell you that.
That's right.
I don't know why I'm telling you that. I just thought, man, well, how do we, we told last podcast about Kay getting bit by her own dog over a good night kiss.
Right.
And I'm like, things just happen. You think, how does that happen? Well, how do I have a black eye and tear my ACL going to the bed in 2 different nights? What's going on?
Jay says
The Apostle Paul had it right. Those who marry will face many troubles in this life.
Yeah.
And I want to spare you this.
and it may be even trying to get to your own bed.
It's amazing how that's your go-to in any marriage situation.
I've been using that one a lot. But most people say, that's not in the Bible. I said, yeah, it said if you marry, there will be more troubles.
Where is that?
You have more
Phil?
It's
troubles.
in 1 Corinthians 7.
I want to make sure it's not your
7, about
translation.
verse 28.
Because I've heard you say that many times.
It's
I've
1
actually
Corinthians,
did.
But you've never double checked it?
No,
I never did.
he just took your word
I
for
do
it.
want to see that that's in there.
Verse 28.
Verse
Yeah.
28. But if you
That's-
do marry, you have not sinned.
That's right.
If a virgin marries, she has not sinned. That's why I
right.
never noticed this.
Yeah.
Because once I read that, I thought, what's he talking about? But those who marry will face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you that. How do you find that verse?
I just ran up on it because I got to talking to a lot of people, and they kept saying, we have so many troubles. It's just trouble with trouble. I said, yep, the Apostle Paul told you. People who marry, they face many troubles.
He was talking about walking through a door because you didn't know your wife.
That sounds pretty
It's real
troubling.
easy. If you're single, you don't have a woman in there sleeping.
Well, you don't have the door
putting
shut.
stuff in the
I
door.
guess so.
You just fix the door. Nobody will ever know it. Most of the time, most women, if you tear the door down, getting in there, most of them will wake up and
She
say,
ain't
"Who
gonna
is
wake
it?"
up. Nah.
You know.
Oh, you could look. I could step. I mean, a flea could run across, the living room floor, and Lisa's gonna wake up. You talk about a light sleeper. I mean, one light goes on. She goes around. We go in a hotel. And of course, we sleep in so many hotels, and so there's lights coming. I wake up in the middle of the night, and she's up there. She's like taping the drapes to the deal. She can't take any light, any sound. I mean, it's got to be perfect.
You know what's weird is like we all our kids at various occasions would get up in the middle of the night and come to our bedroom. I think that's a normal, universal thing. Well, she hears those little feet pitter patter
And she wakes
on
right up.
carpet. She would be the one. I wouldn't hear that. She would say, "What do you need?" And then I'm like, "What's happened here?" And then you hear the voice, and I'm like, "So that wakes you up." Rip through the door, do a belly roll, cry out in pain. Nothing. That's Jace being Jace.
That's exactly right.
We had this conversation.
I see where you fit on the scale of
the argument came up because I brought up the kids. I'm like, I don't understand why you wake up on that. I'm writhing in pain over something you caused, and I get nothing. I don't even get a raise of the eyebrow and think, "Are you okay?" I was like,
It's a
"That's
tough
all."
life out there, Jace. Get used to it, son.
Your verse makes perfect sense. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, Missy, you married a woman that has some Robertson tendencies there with little compassion. My favorite place Dad used that verse, Chase, was at Sadie's wedding. Like to the whole audience.
I know.
They're up there fixing to tie a knot, and somebody said, "You want to say a few words?" I said, "Yeah, I'll say a few
Why would
words."
you do
That was his
Phil?
opening line.
I was as uncomfortable in that moment as I've ever been. When you read that, I thought,
Sadie
what is he
loved it.
doing?
First, she was shocked. She said, "Did he say what I think he just said?"
She lied to
Somebody
you.
said,
She
yeah.
said she loved it.
She said she loved it. She said it put her and Christian at ease because she thought, "Oh well, here we go. It's the Robertson wedding." So she says it after.
I thought, what is he doing? That was my thought when you read that. I thought,
So what do you want me to tell them? People who marry will never face any trouble. Once you get married, the troubles are over.
It's not that I didn't agree with you, but I know how women can be about weddings. And I was thinking, Phil, they're not going to like this. I was thinking Corey and Kay. I thought they're going to get you.
That's why I stress when people are searching for, to live a life of peace and quiet and tranquility. And first one thing, and comfort. God's the God of comfort. But you do have to remember, if it's you and you're just single, it's not as burdensome.
Yeah.
So I tell people who have decided not to marry for whatever reason, I just tell them, I said, you know what? Good to go.
Yep.
You have every right. You don't have to marry.
Yeah, I agree.
And if people say, what's wrong with you because you're not married and you're 35 years old, I just tell them, said, don't let that bother you.
Yeah, that's a good advice.
And, churches, and especially women in churches, I saw Lisa do it for years, is they put a lot of pressure on single people to get married. And you shouldn't do that because, if you have the gift of
Shouldn't do
celibacy,
that at all.
You know, when I met my wife,
All you single people out there, you have every right to say, I'm not going to marry, or at least I'm not worried about it.
Just make
Rock
sure.
on and don't worry about it.
I met my wife.
Hang on, Jess. Let's take a break. So this time of year, we celebrate our independence, July the 4th, which is coming up soon, and all the values that made us great. One of our sponsors is a company called Patriot Mobile. And not only do they share our beliefs, but they really stand behind all of the beliefs with action. They're the only Christian conservative wireless carrier, and they donate a portion of every dollar to organizations that we would like. So we like these guys, and if you're looking to switch to a carrier, they're good to consider. They have two great offers to choose from. You can either get 50% off your first 2 months or $100 off a phone. Both come with free Premier activation if you go to patriotmobile.com/Phil. So that's where you go to check these guys out. It's easy to switch. They're going to save you some money. patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-PATRIOT. Veterans and first responders get to save even more, which is another good reason why this is such a great company. PatriotMobile.com/Phil if you'd like to switch your service.
I met my wife a day after I declared that I'm going to go single the rest of my life. I was like, that's it. I'm done.
Yep.
Because I just come off a bad dating situation. I was like, you know what? I'm done. Of course, then God said, no, what about this girl? I was like,
Most people don't understand what Jesus was saying. Some people are eunuchs because they were born that way. They're just not attracted to. They're not going to marry.
Well, I always tell when I was
Your buddies, what's his name over in Texas? He's a eunuch, but I mean, old bachelor.
But you don't know that. I mean, just don't. I don't know. I mean, I like the.
He's right in what he says, but at the same time, it's like
I know. But who's to know? They just may not want to get married.
Right.
Then that's fine.
Plus, some people wait till they get to be. Somebody told me not long ago, some guy got married at 72.
Oh yeah.
Finally married.
Yeah.
But what are you rascal?
It happens sometimes. And you old rascal.
You old rascal.
Well, I always describe, even with me, like, so I'd had so many problems, and it was me. I was the problem from 14 to 18 with girls. It was, we talked about that in the last podcast, kind of when you have that first awareness as a person, like, and I almost remember the day I was on a school bus. So I was going to the 10th grade, and like a girl walked on the bus, and I remember I went to school with her the year before, but when she walked on the bus, she had changed a lot, that summer.
Yep.
And I remember in my mind thinking, whoa.
In 5 seconds, you said, I think I'm in love.
That's exactly right. So, and she wound up being my girlfriend. But here's what happened. I mean, I went on a carnal, lifestyle for 4 years. So when I became a Christian, I thought, you know what? I think I'll be a lot better off not going the women route, because that had been my biggest mess up. It wasn't too hard to walk away from alcohol and all that, but I thought I can't do this. So I was just going to just pull a Paul. But what I realized about 2 months in, it's not my gift.
Yeah.
I mean, then I started, the temptation started. So that's when I actually called Lisa, and we eventually connected and got married. But I just
The Apostle
knew.
Paul did say, and he just said, I wish all men were as I am.
Right.
Regarding marriage. I'm not married.
Yeah.
I wish they all, however, there's so much immorality. Each person should have his own wife, and each wife her
And he
own
said
husband.
it's better to marry than burn with passion.
Sure.
Meaning that if it's not
So
your gift.
you were describing those years.
Oh, and look, when Lisa and I got back together, we made a commitment not to, because we had already been immoral, but we made a commitment not to. But look, the wedding date got moved up because my biology was taking over my theology in a heartbeat.
But
Yeah.
I've got. But y'all have said about me, because y'all know I waited until I got married, and I speak about that in my speeches, because I wish there would have been more speakers when I was 14 to 18 who would have said, "Do it God's way. It's okay to be single. Don't."
Yeah.
Because you're getting so much pressure, and now in our culture, it's magnified 1,000 times.
That is correct.
But I've never viewed that as a gift, even though
You need to
people
remind people of that, Jace. You can wait till you get married before you have sex.
But I've always said it wasn't that I felt like it was a gift. I felt like it was I had a good plan, which my plan was confrontation right off the bat, which was I'm not going to touch you in a marital way. I think I would say inappropriate or whatever I would tell them. And I would tell them I love God more than I love them. And I just gave a speech every time. So I set the tone for how it was going to go, which the girls that I dated who were not believers, no matter what they said, that quickly got resolved because I brought it up. I was like, this is who I am.
Oh, yeah.
And it just,
And he looked up pretty quick, and they weren't there.
As in 5 minutes or 5 seconds. It just.
Well, there you go.
I remember this one girl. Look, beautiful.
That's why the old
tall.
guy with the GQ magazine said, "You really expect somebody to believe you didn't have sex with your wife, your girlfriend, before you married her? You really think we're going to believe that?" Jace's reply was, "I don't care whether you believe it or not."
But this tall, beautiful girl in high school, I remember, and I gave her not the formal speech, but just we were sitting in class together, and I was interested in her, and And she just got so offended when I said that. She's like, well, you never have had this. If you do, I'll change your mind.
Yeah.
And which kind of made me
what a
I was more scared then because I was thinking sexual
Rightfully so.
diseases and this
Microbes, Jase,
loud,
microbes.
and I was like, well, no, trust me, I'm not interested. Let me make this clear.
Jace, her parting thought was, what a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, what she said,
All this flesh here, and he claims no.
what she called me was the equivalent of a same sex.
Yeah.
I mean, she was like,
She used a slur on
which, yeah, I thought, now here I am getting that response just because I'm trying to do it God's way, which made me think about this culture and being so
Hell
magnified.
hath no fury as a woman scorned.
I turned her down, and all of a sudden, she was doing what people view as homophobic. She was attacking me.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm so good looking. I'm not allowing you to turn me down.
You know what? You know what this was? You were.
Jace, there's an old saying in the old days, she wasn't marrying stock, son. Not marrying
So
stock.
you were a living example of Genesis 39 because when Joseph was in Potiphar's house, Mrs. Potiphar was not used to being turned down. And so, and it said he was well built and handsome, young guy, and he's a teenager. And so she comes in and says, sleep with me now. And he gives her a little speech. He says, how could I do such a thing as sin against God?
Yep.
Which is basically what you said, and look, and then she's tried to
tearing his apparel off.
and then claims he tried to rape her and got him thrown in prison, which would have meant death.
Boy, she'd have made him a good woman.
Do you know that old girl later on that year, I started dating another girl, and then she had the gall because I was sitting right beside her in class. She's like, yeah, saw who you turned me down for. Like,
So she
You know what I mean?
she didn't get over it.
no, bitter. But I found some power in that because it bothered her to the point where she'd make conversation about it. And I got some energy from that.
I
You know,
wonder
in
how
a
that-
positive way, I thought, yeah, I will forever be the rest of your life the guy who said, no, not a chance. How's that make you feel?
I wonder how that old gal's life turned out. I bet it didn't turn out very well.
Seen her, I would love to know what happened. But I'd just be scared to do the research.
So the reason I use the word gift, Jace, is because in 1 Corinthians 7:7, Paul said, I wish that all men were as I am, but each man has his own gift from God.
Yep.
One has this gift, another has that.
But he wasn't married, and I eventually got married.
But he viewed that
you
as
see
an
what I mean?
ability to not. I just think
mean, maybe you're right. I'm
know.
just saying I struggle with that because I just thought, well, I got to get
'Cause I have to-
Well, look, it wasn't like I wasn't attracted. That you know what I mean? I just thought it's amazing how small a conversation you think is, but if you weren't having that conversation, because it's awkward
Yeah.
to just come out and say that, but I don't really care. I'm
Well,
saying
and to Dad's point, our culture has made it where you either have to like
There's something wrong with
right,
you if you don't.
It's either opposite sex or same sex, but there's no in between.
If you don't do wrong with me, there's something wrong with that.
That's right. And I've got two friends. You mentioned one of them. I got two friends. One's in his 70s and one is in his 60s. And neither one of them have ever been married. They're Christian men. They just don't seem to have any desire to want to be with a woman, to be married. They're
Kudos to them.
That's what I'm saying. It looks like to
well,
me
that's
they're
what
a
I'm
picture
saying.
of this.
Where's the balance? I mean, look, I remember another time I was sitting at a basketball game and I had my hands out like this. I'm watching the game. I got, a couple.
Were you like
buddies
an
in
airplane?
front
You were
of
trying
me.
to be an
I
air-
was just, I was being cool. I was young. I was a teenager, and so
You're just kind of lounging.
I'm
isn't it?
watching the game, and a smoking hot girl that I know that I never dated or anything, she sits on my hand. Like, I mean, I go to pull my hand, and she like, no, and I look at her, and she's like, how's that feel?
This is a true story, right?
Yes.
You're not making this up, right?
And I said, I forgot what I said, but it made me nervous. I know that.
Yeah.
I said, can I have my head back? And I didn't answer the question. And I just acted like it didn't happen. But I thought, it wasn't like I didn't like that. And I wasn't flattered. And I wanted to pursue that more. But I just thought what you said a while ago. This is not marrying material. This is way too easy. This is way too fast. This is too quick.
So for all you young guys out there, if a girl ever sits on
But
your hand,
you were right
might-
in your assessment. But most people at that age,
Yeah.
See, to me,
Hang on, Jess. Let's take a break.
they just passed a law in Louisiana whereby it's against the law to cut a bald cypress.
Now, there's a law you can get behind, right?
I've planted thousands of them.
Right. Yeah, they're all over our property.
Thousands of them are growing.
Well,
they
they
grow
should-
pretty fast too.
they
Yeah,
should give you a medal.
they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them 8 foot, 10 foot tall. And they had been there about 5 years. So they're doing great.
So Dad is actually a spokesperson for one of our sponsors, which is called Fast Growing Trees, because
That's it.
you plant trees that grow, and some of them grow fast. These guys are really great. They're the world's largest online nursery. And Lisa and I have used them for the southern layer. We ordered some trees. They showed up. They were in great shape. They were easy for us to plant. So over 1 million people have bought trees from fastgrowingtrees.com. They got a 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee. That means your plants will arrive happy, healthy, and ready for planting. So now through July 31st, you go to fastgrowingtrees.com/Robertson and you get 15% off. That's fastgrowingtrees.com/Robertson.
I've always said trees don't need hugs, but if they did, I'd hug a cypress.
You betcha. You betcha. The flesh, what is it? The
body,
Spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
But Phil, in
Yeah.
that moment, this seems scary to me. I was more like, this is happening too fast.
Well, biblically
This-
speaking, it is a scary thing.
Well, it is.
That was
It's
not
nothing to mess
appealing.
around with.
That was
But I
not
do like
appealing to me.
what you said about making a plan. It's interesting because some of the things that Lisa and I taught in our last marriage seminar, I do some stuff out of Job 31. And I mentioned this before. Job 31:1, Job says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a girl. That's a plan. In other words,
Now, our listeners today, there are many of them. Y'all going to have to face up to it. They're thinking right now, Jase is lying. They're saying he's not telling the truth.
I don't care. Phil.
Jase, you can't tell me
I
he
don't
didn't
think
succumb
most
to
people-
it.
Phil,
He
I
didn't
don't-
wait it out. He didn't wait till he got married. No. So,
I think at 51, though, they're like, why would he even make it up? But you know what I'm saying? But maybe you're right. But I wanted to say this because I think in our culture, I was talking to a guy who runs a Christian youth camp not long ago, and there's used to the main problems were, as you can imagine, drugs, alcohol, and if you can get somebody to talk about, there's moments of sex that comes up people want to talk about. But now the way our culture is, it's like this gender identity is the number one issue
yeah.
because it's already awkward for everyone. Even me, when I was doing that, look, the hail, and I mean hail as in hailstorm, of persecution that I was getting from my buddies was off the charts. Because they're there and they're like, what are you doing?
and they're trying to justify what they're doing.
Well, but they're like, what, you idiot? She sat on your hand and you acted like a little girl. I mean, what's wrong with you? And then they would assume that I must not be attracted to girls.
Yeah.
And so now I could.
So you got around to converting many of these guys.
Well, later on. Yeah, that didn't make me feel better about myself, though, in the moment. And what I'm saying is the hail of gunfire that I'm getting from them about, and it always went to the same sex attack. They're like, well, you don't like girls. But, even I'd like to say I was confident in myself and my decision, but as a young teenager, I would question. I was like, maybe there is something wrong with me. I mean, they were just, just abuse every day. And so it was tough. And so I get it. And now
But that might be one of the reasons, Jace, when the Apostle Paul was talking, but stuff like what Jace is talking about, sometimes the Almighty starts young and sets them apart for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Well,
Because you said it a while ago, it's a gift.
That's what Paul said. I mean, it seemed like because of what he was going to have to do, that gift served him well.
Which means when all you young people out there saying, well, it can't be done.
Right.
Well, talk to Jace. Yeah,
it can be. I think since
he was a better man than me.
Well, people have different reasons. It's like my friend Hawk we were talking about earlier. I asked him because we're really close, and I said, "Well, why did you never want to get married?" Because I know at one time you were in college. I mean, you probably other people put pressure, and he had an interesting answer. He said, "Well, I looked at my parents' marriage, and they stayed married for over 50 years together, but it just wasn't good. It wasn't what it should have been." He said, and I just never wanted to get married. I thought, you know what? I don't want to live a sham of a life with somebody. And so sex and all that never even entered his mind. He just saw an example. He thought he didn't want to do that. Yep. And so, people have different motivations for why they do it.
By the way, he had every right to.
Well, yeah, and obviously it wasn't going to be a problem for him like it would be other people.
Yep.
So.
But, I mean, even in Romans, when he was making a point about being under grace, he used an illustration from marriage, in Romans 7.
Yeah.
And at verse 5, of course, this is right before he gets into the what I don't want to do, I do, and I have this battle going on. So look, I got the same battle going on when I was a teenager, and everybody else does. But if you don't have a God conscience and you don't have a plan, you're not motivated by grace, and you don't have God's Spirit, and that you have this marketing campaign going on with our globe that's like, well, if you're struggling with who you are and you're not acknowledging, which they don't say this, but it's the hidden message. If you're not acknowledging that you were made by a living God on purpose, well, why wouldn't you question? Yeah. Why wouldn't you try something different? Especially there's just so much marketing coming at us from every angle.
Yeah, I think people get swept up.
I was going to read this 7:5 because he said, for when we were controlled by the sinful nature, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in our bodies so that we bore fruit for death. But now, by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the laws that we serve in the new way of the Spirit. Now, I know he's talking about living under the Spirit compared to the law, but you got to remember, you can't underestimate having the Holy Spirit. When I look back on it, I just don't think, because Paul never was married.
Right.
I wasn't like that. I feel like I had the Holy Spirit. It was a struggle. It was daily. I did have doubts. I did question what I was doing because of the hail of persecution that happened every day. But I do think that it was the power of the Spirit that was leading me to suppress these passions that I had and that were aroused. It's like when the girl sat on my hand, look, I was thinking, this is nice. But at the same time, I was scared, thinking, this is way too fast. I was wanting to do this later. I mean, just not right off the bat.
It's kind of like we call it the notice and dismiss philosophy, because, I mean, a good-looking woman walks by, and especially if they're not very modestly dressed, or you're at a beach and someone comes by, I mean, you as a man, you notice. The question is, what do you do next? Do I linger? Do I think about, what would that be like? Do I just dismiss that and think I'm not going to look back?
Because if I'm not careful, I will commit adultery with her and never touch her.
That's right.
Because in
Jesus said that's where you do it.
Well, it comes
that's
down
where
to
it starts.
the struggle. I mean, I think you can even look, and then look, I'm not going to lie. I justified just looking, especially when I was a teenager, thinking.
At least I'm not doing it.
I mean, and right or wrong, you can make your own decision. All I've said is it was a war.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even with Miss and I, which we didn't struggle the first, couple of years, just because I was done. I was like, I'm not going to get married, even though I was dating her. And we just had a spiritual foundation that we built our relationship on. And but look, I've told this story many times. I didn't see her for 3 months before we got married because I just couldn't keep my hands off of her. So I was like, I'll meet you at the altar. If you got a need, call me. And that's basically what we did, which
Yeah.
created drama.
Yeah.
I think it was good.
That was
I
good.
mean, and once I got used to it, it's fine.
Let's take another break. Well, I think it goes back to that Job 31. After he said he made a covenant with his eyes, then he said, "And I don't lurk at my neighbor's door." And
Yeah.
he said, if I lurk at my neighbor's door, he said, may my wife grind another man's grain.
Yeah.
Meaning that, you know what, if I'm going to be unfaithful to her, then why would I expect somebody not to be unfaithful to me?
Yep.
And I like that idea. As Jason said it well, it's about making a plan for yourself, not to put yourself in bad situations. You know, we wind up in these situations where you start talking to this woman, maybe it's online, maybe it's some other way, and then we wonder why all of a sudden we're in a situation where we're wanting to go to bed together. Well, you should have stopped that way back at the beginning when you were lurking at the door.
Yeah.
That's where you get into
What's
the
so
problem.
tough now compared to back when we were teenagers is now you have the internet, which is just all this filth and porn at every turn, just being thrown
That's why I
in front
never
of
went down that road. I
No,
said,
it's a
no.
bad
which it
road.
makes it so awkward to have a real meaningful relationship because now you have a skewed view of sex
Sexuality, that's right.
and what women would actually
Look like
do
her.
with you in real life.
That's right, that's
She'd
right.
say, "Heck, no, what are you, an idiot?" But so I think that's difficult. I mean, there's a difference in that and noticing real life women, like what you're saying.
Right.
You're putting yourself in a position to fail if you get hooked. And people, that's all they do is they get hooked on it. It's the idea.
So read through them 10 verses because that's a good starting point on what you have to gain and what you have to lose. Romans 8:28 and following down to about verse 39. So someone read that. One of y'all read that.
Well, those first three, starting in verse 28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And I actually like the variant reading a little bit better. If you in your margin, it says, and we know that all things work together for good to
Yeah.
those who love God. I like that idea that if we're following the plan of God, things are going to work out, even if you go through something bad. Who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, and he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified.
Well, unfortunately, this passage is the positives are missed because there's been so much debate in the religious world
Right,
over
about
what
the
exactly
predestination.
this means, because he throws in that he also glorified, which to me there's no difference in what happens here and the same in Ephesians 2, where he goes through that we were outside of Christ, under the control of the kingdom of the air, meaning the evil one, but then God saved us by grace, not of ourselves. And then all of a sudden he throws in there and seated us with him in the heavenly realms.
Right.
And then it says we're not that we don't work, but he created works for us to do before the creation began.
You remember what he said in Romans 4? The God who can do all things and that calls things that are not as though they were. When you're outside of space and time, this is what most people miss. God, of course, sees the whole picture of how everything's going to work out.
Exactly.
So the idea of foreknowledge shouldn't freak us out like, oh, well, he's only chosen this group or this group.
That's right.
It's just that he knows how it all is going to play out because he's outside of time and space. So when he says he foreknew something, it's because he sees the whole thing, including the time when Jesus is going to come back.
Yeah, it's hard for people to get their mind wrapped around Jesus' famous nickname, which is I am,
Yeah.
before Abraham was. So he basically is not bound by space and time.
Correct.
And you think, well, time and distance in every other relationship is a barrier.
Yep.
So you can't be close. Like if someone dies, obviously you can't be close to them, or somebody moves away,
Right.
or they were here 100 years ago. And so all of a sudden you got a passage like the one in 1 Peter where it says, though you have not seen him, talking about our relationship to God, you love him and are filled with an inexpressible joy. Well, it's hard for people to have that experience because they're looking at God as having the time and distance barrier. Because most people, maybe I shouldn't say most, a lot of people think God right now is 1,000,000 miles away at least.
Right.
So they're like, "Why? It's a time,
God's not real.
It's a time and distance.
He's not.
That's why they're functioning like He's not watching." So when you get a passage like this, it's hard to have all the qualities of God if you start naming His characteristics. He's eternal. He's all-knowing.
He's omnipotent,
all-powerful, omnipresent, which is not bound by space, I guess.
Right.
Everywhere at
He's
once.
all righteous. There's no.
So look, somebody will say, well, I have trouble praying because I don't feel like my prayers are getting past the ceiling. I was like, well, the ceiling has nothing to do with it because God's not above your ceiling.
Yeah.
He's right. Trust me, you think it, he knows it. I mean, but it's hard to, I think the biggest problem is people, and then that word predestined scares people, but think about it. He says predestined to do what? To be conformed like Christ. The predestination is the Jesus component. That's why in Ephesians 1, it says in Him we were predestined. So
it's through a person that He saved the human race.
That's right. So the part that's set there for us, that was set before creation was even happened, was that we would have an opportunity to make a choice.
And He gave us the model.
That's right.
Before this whole salvation started.
That's exactly right.
Grace didn't start till the model of grace.
And you follow that chain, then He says He calls them. But think about it. If you're called, then you have an opportunity to answer the call or not.
I mean, you would think.
I mean, it seems so simple to me, but
it does to us. But there are people probably listening to what we're saying who are like, "You've got it all wrong."
If you didn't have Him there as a model, you wouldn't have known how to be predestined to be like Him.
That's right.
Because if you don't know Him yet, or you say, so He gave you His life.
That's why I think people miss it, is they see the predestination in the person as opposed to Jesus, the person.
That's right.
That was the whole thing. So when we make a decision to get into Christ, that's the key. Let's take our last break.
I try to explain it like this, because would you say that another quality of God, this was where I was going with this, is that God is love?
Yep.
Is He love?
Oh,
is He all loving?
1 John 4 says He is.
So where this is going to go for you people who like debates is you get to a point that where you got a group of people who are not looking at the positives here, but are, in my opinion, but they're saying, well, God chose these people before the beginning of time, and He knew who they were, and He does know.
He does know
who they are. And so they'll make the jump to say, well, then God doesn't love the ones He didn't choose.
Correct.
Yep.
But the reason I went through the characteristics of God, and you have 1 John 4, is clear. God is love. So when you all of a sudden step in and start saying who God loves, and they'll bring up the Jacob and Esau illustration, and so you say, whoa, what does that mean? It's a completely different context. And we're not saying that God doesn't hate the actions or sin, because He is righteous. That's another one of His qualities. But He loves people and He creates people, and that's universal because it's a characteristic you can't undo. You can't pick and choose. And so when I read something like the Jacob and Esau illustration, I think, yeah, there's an illustration to what happened on the action side of it. Mm-hmm. But don't ever doubt, you can't all of a sudden pick and choose what characteristic from a God personality that you want. Because once you say He doesn't love some, well, then He no longer is love.
That's right.
He was
and
love.
What does it mean when Peter...
You see, that won't work.
What does it mean when Peter says God does not want anyone to perish? That
means what
that doesn't mean anyone, just the ones who have been called.
But I've had these debates with and I have, because I was like, well, let me give it a chance. I want to have an open mind.
I've listened to,
and I want to listen. And they're always trying to change these things to fit a narrative that a group of people have got together and say, well, we believe different. And if a lot of you are saying, well, what's the big deal with that? The big deal is we're trying to figure out God's personality with our choice.
That's right.
Because He gave us the ability to choose.
And that was evident from the very first man and the very first woman.
Yep.
Choice. And because without choice, you don't have, there's no way to believe. There's no way to have faith. There, all the elements you talked about love, think about faith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what difference would faith make if I didn't have to answer the call? So I think when you look at it, his foreknowledge is his power. The predestination is the idea that it was in Christ. We're called, and then if we answer the call, what happens next? We're justified.
Yep.
We're free from accusation and all those texts that we read.
Yeah.
Then when you're glorified, Jace is right. The glorification, he already sees us that way.
That's what I think. I think it's from his perspective,
Exactly.
which is really what this whole debate is about.
That's right.
Is that when he says in 30, those he predestined, and you say, what does that mean? He knew, and that's why I believe that God uses us, the ones who he's chosen, that we chose him. He uses us to spread the message of Jesus. So that's why I believe that he arranges encounters.
That's right.
Because you then tie in the Acts 17 where it says he determines the time set for them in creation when he created us and the exact places where they should live. Well, why did he do that? It says so that we would reach out for him and seek him. That's pretty evident to me.
Right.
Which it always gets back, every time I have this discussion, it always gets back to one reason. It's why we're here now. It's why this keeps going on. Now, there'll come a day where he's like, okay, that's good. Whatever. I don't know if it's a number. We had one of our instructors who said that he kind of based it off a passage in Revelation.
Yeah.
Or it's just time. But I know one thing, he knows, and I'm just good with that. I don't have to know.
He has appointed a day when he will judge the world with justice. He's given proof of this to all men by raising him
why
from
it's
the dead.
that day, I don't know.
You get glimpses of it because in Hebrews, he mentioned all those people that lived by faith before Jesus came under a law of works.
Yep.
But he says, together with us, they were made. So he had no problem crediting righteousness all the way back.
Right.
Why would he have a problem crediting glory to us?
That's right.
Who understand that? In fact, the rest of the passage, and I'll just read it in our last.
Well, let me
minutes.
say one thing, Al. I had a weird encounter. Why am I calling that weird? I had a God encounter, I think. I was metal detecting, and a guy recognized me, just facial profiling. I'm out there in somebody's yard, and he pulls in there. Well, old Murray, who you brought to the Lord, and I hate him interrupting you, but I think it really goes on with what this verse says. I just feel like I need to say this. Murray's all the time trying to get Jesus into people because and Murray's like, I ain't gonna be here much longer, he'd overcome cancer.
He's cancer, he's all kinds of stuff.
So it's like every moment that somebody comes, he's like, get him, Jace. I'm like, you do it, Murray. And he's like, no, because he feels like he's not worthy to do it or whatever. But I'm like, just tell him about Jesus. But he came over and the guy said something about the podcast. And he said, well, I had given up on God and because my daughter was taken from me in a car wreck and she left a 2-year-old daughter, his granddaughter, he said that we raised. And he said, I was just angry at God. And all of a sudden this got real quick. It got awkward. We're in the yard and he said, what bothered me, and he quoted this verse, this Romans 8:28. He said, these Christian people come up to me. Of course, Murray and I are these Christian people sitting here, but we weren't in a church building. We're out here.
Which is why he felt like he could share.
And he said, these Christian people came up saying, God works to the good. And he was like, and look, the guy, he was be like, he was using profanity in this analogy, but which didn't bother me because I was like, he's angry.
Yeah.
And he's like, they did that, and then they just went on. He's like, they didn't.
In other words, just deal with it.
Well, right.
That's
He
how
was
he
like,
felt,
where are you at now? You just weren't around. But he read this verse that when I read this verse, we know that God works for the good of those who love him. We're excited about it. and this guy he's mad, and I could tell. But he said, I got to listening to y'all's podcast, and I thought, He said, I think I had a wrong view of God. And the point he made was, he's like, what I looked as bad, he said, because she is a believer. And we got to raise this grandbaby. And he was bragging on, she's a grown woman now, a lawyer. And he was being positive. And he's like, I basically realized that I was just looking at it through my own eyes. And I thought, you know what? If that's not the point of the first 8 chapters,
that's exactly right,
of Romans, and which is my point about this being a controversial passage. Make sure you're looking at it from God's perspective and not yours, because this whole Romans 8, what you were fixing to read, is all about Him.
Right.
He's saying, if I'm for you, who can be against you?
Well, it's a picture of
my son.
It's a picture of what glory looks like. But look, what you just described in this gentleman that you talked to was exactly what the passage is talking about. Because again, because you spend a period of time angry at God doesn't mean that somewhere down the line you're going to figure out that, you know what, without hope, without a realization that you can be with your daughter again, what do you have? A life of anger and bitterness? Yeah. That's what the evil one wants. So the only way you can figure out what the good is to do what he did. And he finally saw it through a divine lens. He said, you know what? I'm going to see her again. She was a person of faith. And so what you're seeing is him release that anger, because now as you embrace God, who is love, you don't have space for anger and bitterness.
And I think it was a God-orchestrated
It's a great
encounter.
illustration of what this is
the
about.
guy wasn't like, I was like, what do you do, for a living? I was just curious. Then he was like, I mow yards. And that, I don't know, not that that's not extravagant, but I just thought, here's a guy mowing yards that come up. I'm an hour and a half away from where I normally live, and we're talking about some pain that happened years ago.
It's hard.
Over this passage, and we quoted the 37 through 39, which said, in all these things we're more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I'm convinced that neither death, let me just think, that's what happened here.
Nor
life, neither angels, demons, the present, the future, powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord.
That sounds pretty glorious.
If you don't experience that, I hate to read a sign, but they got this one right. If you don't experience that, who moved? Because he's saying, that's not going to separate. None of that will separate my love for you.
And I'll close with this.
Death itself.
I'll close with this. It's a good reminder for those of you listening, because we got a lot of believers that listen. Don't you think you're helping people sometimes by quoting a verse in a moment where people are in pain? I found it best to say, I love you. I'm here for you. What can I do for you?
Yeah.
That's not the time people are ready to get theology, when they just experience something
exactly.
painful.
I never say, God's got a plan.
Boy, God needed another
out.
angel. That's why your child is dead. Don't do stuff like that, because it can wound people for a long. You think you're helping. I get it. I've heard it so many times in my life. But clips and phrases and colloquialisms is not what people need in that moment. They just need somebody to hug them. I'm here for you. What can I do to help you? That's the best way to approach people in tragedy.
And it's like he said, you say something that sounds good, and then they never talk to you again, or you never check.
And I get it. It's awkward. It's hard to say something. So you know what? Just don't. I find just being there helps the most. So
you're right.
Talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.